she has faced accusations that she's a genocidal bleep. The C word is used. She's had people coming up to her in the supermarket with her children. Her husband's private work phone has been terminated.
I think when we spoke last week, we were both a bit agog by this betting scandal, and
Yes.
it gets worse and worse. It's now so we've got a cabinet minister, Alistair Jack, apparently admitting to having bet on the date of the election, though not during the period under investigation. But then the Gambling Commission is investigating a third parliamentary candidate, this time a Labour candidate, Kevin Craig, suspended by the party for admitting he put money on himself losing. It's spreading, Carolyn.
Murkier and murkier. This election campaign for the Conservatives already dogged by disaster, wasn't it, from day one? It's just been derailed again. And this story has dominated a whole week of coverage. It looks like it will carry on doing exactly that. Look, I think the point is that while we thought that last week the now disowned Tory candidate Craig Williams might have been a one-off, it does feel as if more and more people are getting dragged into this. And the public really, they're already turned off by arguments about tax and immigration, aren't they? Because they just don't trust politicians of any stripe to deliver for them. And this really just further undermines confidence in the political class. You know, this feeling that there's entitlement at the centre, that they're playing a game, they're having a flutter, making a few quid, and you know, politicians in it for themselves. They've really got the general public going with this, and the public really do know about betting. I think, isn't it, about half the adult population who place a bet on a monthly basis, so they know how easy it is. But they don't like this idea that politicians in the know are now using information. I'm not saying it's insider knowledge, because technically it's not illegal to bet on the timing of the election, but it's the smell, the look of something nasty. And the MP, or the former MP who's now campaigning to be re-elected, Tobias Ellwood, he's suggested that there should be a ban on politicians betting at all on elections. I think that's going to be the debate now.
Well, if I stay there, Caroline, because we can bring in Dr. Anthony Pickles, who is an assistant professor in social anthropology at the University of Birmingham and is an expert in these sorts of things. Anthony, explain what the rules are on political gambling, because in some countries it's banned altogether. Like, you can't bet on politics in the US.
No, that's right. You can't bet on politics in the US except for exceptions that are carved out for research purposes. But in the UK, we've had a really long and permissive history of gambling on politics. There's records of it from Cambridge colleges back in the 18th century. There was a known MP who took private bets during a long part of the 20th century between MPs in the UK. And it's generally part of the kind of long-held tradition in the UK of being able to walk into a betting shop and come up with an idea or something you want to bet on, and then asking for odds and getting those odds in return.
But the big difference is it's one thing saying, well, I've identified this person, they might become leader of the Labour Party at some point in the distant future. Whereas this appears, at least, and we don't know the details of it yet, that people knew for a fact that something was going to happen because they were in the know. They were in a meeting where they knew an election was coming, and they put a bet on it, knowing it to be the case, rather than just having a flutter.
Yeah, this is one of the clearest possible cases of someone having what would be conceived to be insider information. But it is quite, when you look at the cases that have come out subsequently, you're looking at much more kind of murky areas of what counts as inside knowledge, and also who's in a position to influence the outcome of that event, especially in the case of Kevin Craig, where he has the potential to influence the outcome of that election. And so in that sense, it's perhaps even a more serious issue.
Yeah, it's interesting that because he clearly felt he was going to lose anyway, but if it was a close run race and you bet against yourself, you could then be seen as not campaigning enough because there was financial gain. Thank you for that, Anthony. Anthony Pickles there from the University of Birmingham. Just coming back to you, Carolyn, we had the news yesterday of people arrested outside Rishi Sunak's home, and you've been making a documentary about MP safety more generally.
I have. It's a documentary for Radio 4 and it's on BBC Sounds. Sorry for the plug, but let me tell you what we've done. We've talked to 4 recent MPs who've really talked about how serious threats against them, their families, and staff are, in their view, corroding Britain's democracy because it means that politicians aren't able to carry out their constituency work in the way that they used to. They used to be able to see constituents face to face. Now you have to have appointments. Now you have MPs and politicians with panic alarms and having to take a whole bunch of security precautions because they and their families are getting death threats, rape threats. We spoke to Suella Braverman, who revealed to us that she is one of 3 reported backbench MPs who now have to receive around the clock personal protection because of recent abuse and attacks. She was scrolling through her phone as I was talking to her, and I'll keep it clean, but she has faced accusations that she's a genocidal bleep. The C word is used. She's had people coming up to her in the supermarket with her children. Her husband's private work phone has been terminated with, it's really so difficult to explain the extent of this. Naz Shah, for example, a Labour MP, as was campaigning again to get re-elected, she's had to explain the threats to her 13-year-old daughter. She received a death threat. The police got in touch. She had to sit her little girl down and say, look, if anything happens to me, remember your mother was doing the right thing. People are explaining about having to wear stab vests. I know that you, on some of your exit interviews with MPs, have heard that. Mike
Yeah,
Freer, for
yeah.
example, saying that his husband just couldn't take it anymore, the thought that his husband was going out in a stab vest. And I talked to one former Conservative MP who said that he and his partner moved into a new house, and she was saying, oh, I don't want all this security stuff, the panic buttons and all of the alarms and all of that malarkey. And then he said she saw me googling stab vests and she said, okay, I realize that this is
Wow.
serious. And you've mentioned constituency homes being targeted, but we know as well that the constituency offices are being vandalized and targeted. In particular, there seems to be a rise in those sorts of attacks since the Gaza conflict escalated last year. Joe Stevens, the Labour shadow Welsh secretary, said that she'd had effigies of bloodstained babies left on the doorstep. Apologies to listeners. I know
know,
this
it's
is horrible,
terrible.
but candles and photographs of the violence in the Middle East pushed through the door with abusive messages. It keeps on coming, and what is the big worry, really, I think, is that the safety is significantly affecting how politicians can do their job. We heard the speaker referring to this, didn't we, last February, when he got it in the neck,
Mm.
actually, for changing party political procedures in the House of Commons. But he quoted fears about the safety of MPs. And if this goes on, one MP has said to me off the record, I'm just worried that after Joe Cox and David Ames, another one of us will die during this campaign.
Oh, it's terrible. And it's like I said, it's something that came up again and again in our exit interviews as well. Carolyn, really good to speak to you as ever. Carolyn Quinn there, joining us in CCHQ. And like I said, you can find that documentary on BBC Sounds.